This video is sponsored by Ratchet Clothing. Okay, so today we're going to be talking about Salvatore Giuliano, who was nicknamed Torrido, and he was a famous bandit in Sicily. Salvatore Giuliano was born in Montelepri, which is a small town in Palermo, Sicily. Around the age when most kids would be entering high school, he went to work with his father on the farm, but soon discovered that farm life wasn't for him. Instead, he took a job delivering electrical supplies for an electrical company. But by the time the Allies invaded Sicily in July 1943, Salvatore Giuliano was already dealing in the black market. Back then, 70% of Italy's food supply came from the black market. During the time of the invasion, two New York bosses were assisting the United States in war efforts: Lucky Luciano and Vito Genovese. Like my own grandfather, Vito Genovese became an interpreter. There's even a picture of him with Giuliano, and Genovese is wearing a United States military uniform. 3 months after the initial invasion on September 2nd, 1943, Giuliano was stopped at a Carabinieri checkpoint. After a search of his horse and baggage, 2 sacks of black market grain was found. Supposedly, he offered the grain in return for his release, but the policeman wouldn't accept the bribe. So Giuliano shot and killed him. Giuliano's version is that the policeman fired first, hitting him in the back, and he returned fire, killing him. This incident and the policeman's death was the beginning of Giuliano's life as a bandit. He was just 21 years old. The Carabinieri went looking for him at his house, but he had already fled, so they locked up his father and a few of the local men. Eventually, Giuliano would help some of these men escape from the prison that they were being held in. Most of these men not only became his loyal followers, but became fellow bandits. Eventually, Giuliano and his men would join the MIS, the Movement for the Independence of Sicily. Giuliano was even given the rank of a colonel, and along with his unit, they would carry out raids on police and government targets. In time, the media would label Giuliano the Italian Robin Hood, as he robbed from the rich and gave to the poor. And in place of a bow and arrow, he would use a gun or a machine gun. In one of his most famous robberies, he snuck into the estate belonging to the Duchess of Pradamino. As a sign of respect, he kissed her hand, and then stole her diamond ring as well as her other jewels, but not before threatening her to give them up. He would wear that diamond ring for the rest of his life. In Sicily, Giuliano became a folk legend. His group of bandits at its peak was estimated at 5,000 men, but his inner circle was a core group of 20. Besides robbing the rich, the bandits would hijack government trucks and distribute the supplies to different towns. A few of the stories which trickled down through generations are of Giuliano's good deeds. Like when a small town in Sicily had its spaghetti rations cut off. Giuliano and his men hijacked a couple of government trucks carrying provisions, including spaghetti, and they distributed the goods in the main piazza of the town. Poor families that were hungry would mysteriously find money under their kitchen doors. Or like the one dying woman that couldn't afford an operation found 50,000 lire underneath her pillow. All acts which gained Giuliano respect from the people, but most importantly, their loyalty. And they would protect him by not cooperating with law enforcement when they came asking questions. Fed up with Giuliano's exploits, the Italian government put a bounty of 1,000,000 lire on his head. But this didn't faze the Sicilian bandit. In turn, he offered double that amount for the capture of Italy's Minister of Interior. Talk about thumbing your nose at the government. Among one of Giuliano's most trusted associates was his cousin Gaspare Pisciotto. He would become his right-hand man, and according to reports, the two were inseparable. Needless to say, regardless of any closeness that they had, Pisciotto would go on to betray Giuliano in the highest degree. The manhunt for Giuliano intensified. The Carabinieri conducted a dragnet surrounding Montelepri in an attempt to catch him. Giuliano was able to escape, but not before shooting and killing another policeman. Having grown up around the mountains, navigating the mountainous terrain was second nature to him. He spent most of his life as a bandit in the mountains and caves. Many of the local mafia bosses supported Giuliano. After all, he was doing a lot of their dirty work, especially robbing the rich landowners and making it easy for these bosses to collect protection money. But as members of that life are usually only loyal to their pockets, they quickly turned on Giuliano. Investigations that once targeted the bosses came to a halt, and the focus turned to Giuliano and his bandits. The politicians wanted Giuliano dead, and since they protected the mafia bosses, any of their political enemies were dispatched. So Giuliano not only had the Italian government hunting for him, but the mafia too. Most believed the mafia bosses feared him and was jealous of his wealth. One local boss that was close to Giuliano was Calogero Vinzini, also known as Don Carlo. Originally, he supported Giuliano and even joined the MIS, as did a lot of the other bosses. But due to political pressure, Vinzini pulled away from Sicily's Robin Hood. When Giuliano realized that he lost Vinzini's support, he threatened to kill him. When the threat reached Vinzini, he ordered Giuliano's death. On May 1st, 1947, 2,000 to 3,000 Italian citizens gathered at Hotel della Ginestra to celebrate May Day, which marked the beginning of summer, an ancient tradition in Europe. At some point, machine guns began firing into the massive crowd. Naturally, pandemonium ensued. 11 people were killed, 65 were injured, including children. The attackers was Giuliano's bandits, who wore identical white raincoats. Does that sound familiar? The shooters of Paul Castellano and Thomas Bellotti in front of Sparks Steakhouse were wearing the same. Maybe somebody in the Gambino family studied history. Nevertheless, prior to the massacre, a camper witnessed the bandits preparing for the attack. He was quickly killed and thrown down a 260-foot well. After the massacre, Giuliano would make a statement that he ordered his men to fire above the crowd. Overall, the bandits were raking in significant money. Between hijacking, the black market, extorting rich landowners, and kidnappings. The next major massacre took place on August 19, 1949, at Bellalampo, a countryside village in Palermo. Giuliano and about 50 of his men attacked the Carabinieri barracks. The bandits used machine guns and explosives, and 7 policemen died that day. As a result, a 2,000-man task force fanned out in Sicily to hunt down Giuliano. At that time, Giuliano and his men are believed to have killed over 100 policemen, 40 civilians, and injuring hundreds. While living on the run, Giuliano often spoke to reporters. One in particular was American journalist Michael Stern. During the interview, he handed Stern a letter addressed to President Truman. In it, he asked for money and arms in order to help Sicily become part of the United States. I'm not sure if the letter ever reached the president or not. To one photojournalist, he explained his fearlessness. He explained that he was more quicker to use his guns than the Carabinieri. As it turns out, Giuliano was often photographed and liked to pose for the camera. Salvatore Giuliano's life came to an end on the evening of July 5th, 1950. Prior to that day, his trusted second-in-command, Gaspare Pisciotta, had a clandestine meeting with the Carabinieri General, Ugo Lucca. Pisciotta asked for impunity and reward money in exchange for setting his cousin Giuliano up. The plan was to lure Giuliano outside into a trap, and the waiting Carabinieri captain, Antonio Perenzi, and his men who would kill Giuliano. Instead, that night on July 5th, Pisciotta waited for Giuliano to fall asleep, and then he shot him twice, killing him. During the confession, he said, "It was I who killed Salvatore Giuliano on July 5th, 1950, in a house in Castelvetrano." After killing Giuliano, Pisciotta ran outside to tell Perenzi, who was waiting in the courtyard. Perenzi's men carried Giuliano's body and laid it down in the courtyard, and then they pumped several rounds into him. General Lucca and Captain Perenzi would hail themselves as the heroes who captured and killed Giuliano. Their version was that at 3:15 on July 5th, Captain Perenzi and his squad of Carabinieri spotted Giuliano and chased him through the streets, exchanging gunfire, where Giuliano was hit several times. Although they couldn't fool the locals in the town who viewed the crime scene. Bloodstains came from up the hill where they dragged Giuliano's body down to the courtyard. In 1952, Pisciotta and other men were charged for the Hotel della Ginestra massacre. Pisciotta and 11 others were convicted. Pisciotta received life in prison, but just 2 years later, he was poisoned. Don't forget, he was locked up with the loyal followers of Salvatore Giuliano. I hope you enjoyed the video. I always found him fascinating. If you did enjoy it, you could hit the like button, and I appreciate those who do. If you're not yet subscribed to the channel, you could do that now as well. Don't forget to check out Ratchet Clothing. I'll put their website link in the description to this video. Okay, ciao for now.